federal funds are critical to maintaining and improving Connecticut's transportation infrastructure. The administration in Washington has placed a much larger focus on improving our nation's rail system. Locally, this has meant support for improvements to the New Haven-Springfield corridor, which many feel is critical to the future of high-speed rail. Conversely, the state, with federal support, is moving toward expending $600 million on a 9-mile busway that will further erode rail right-of-ways and also fails to remove truck traffic from our congested highways. The 5 5th District Chambers of Commerce, who are co-sponsoring this debate tonight, have publicly stated their opposition to the project and have pushed for the use of rail to reconnect Waterbury to Hartford, which they believe will be far less costly. So, please speak to your thoughts on this project and whether or not you would support funding a rail solution as an alternative, since the ability to do both is questionable at best.
I think that we have to have an intermodal transportation strategy moving forward as a nation. We have been over-reliant as a country on simple transit strategies around road building. And if you visit any other industrialized country in the world, you will see the massive investments that they have made, not just in rail, but also in busways and in other pedestrian-related and bicycle-related transportation pathways. I think that the next transportation bill moving forward, and Senator Caligiuri and I agree on this, that we need to, early in the next Congress, pass a long-term transportation investment bill, needs to invest in all of those strategies moving forward. I don't believe that the busway is mutually exclusive from an investment in increased rail capacity through central Connecticut. Right now, I think that our focus has to be on the current project at hand, which is, as I mentioned, a new rail line being built as we speak, running through the central spine of Connecticut from Springfield to New Haven with $160 million of federal support, and I might add significant state support as well. I think the next challenge is then to increase the quality and capacity of our existing rail spines, moving from Waterbury down to Bridgeport, and in the western part of this district from Danbury to Norwalk. Once you strengthen those branch lines, then you are poised, I think, for a very important link from Waterbury to Hartford. And I'm going to be fully supportive of the Chambers represented here today in an effort to bring that rail line online in the not-so-distant future. I don't believe that that's exclusive from the busway, and frankly, I believe that we should be investing in as many different methods of transportation, as many different means of moving people off the roads, and ultimately moving freight off the roads as possible.
2 minutes for Mr. Caligiuri.
Ultimately, I agree. I think Congressman Murphy is exactly right. The busway and the rail should not be considered mutually exclusive projects. And with all due respect to the Central Connecticut Chambers, I disagree with their position on this issue. I support the busway project. The busway project was well thought out. It was identified after years of study as a tremendously important tool for relieving congestion on I-84 in the greater Hartford area. What was really significant about the busway project is that the $237 billion that have been approved by the federal government for that project have actually been approved not through an earmark, but through a competitive grant-making process where that project was deemed one of the top 5 national projects throughout the country. So we need to move ahead with that. The other reason why I disagree with the premise of the question is because you couldn't take the $237 billion that's been approved for the busway project and simply transfer it over to the rail project. It won't work that way, because the $237 billion has been allocated expressly through that grant-making process for the busway project. So I think we should move ahead with the busway project, not view the two as being mutually exclusive, and as Congressman Murphy indicated, make sure that as part of a comprehensive transportation strategy, we are investing in the development of rail as vigorously as we are roads and bridges and other aspects of our infrastructure.
The PPAC, the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, has clearly been a controversial subject since its passage. As business digs deeper into this particular piece of legislation, they are finding some good things and some not so good things. For example, despite the claim that the legislation would control costs, Anthem has announced in Connecticut and has had approved a 47% rate increase. What are your thoughts on the PPAC And what do you see for the future of this particular legislation?
Well, as I was saying, first of all, thank you to everyone for enduring. I'm actually impressed that there's so many people back after the break, and thank you to our great Farmington firefighters for their work in responding and getting us back in here. I think when we talk about healthcare, we first have to define the problem. One of the fundamental liabilities of the American economy is the fact that we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and by a factor of 2. And it frankly presents an enormous obstacle to our competitiveness around the globe. You add on to that the fact that there are far too many Americans that can't afford that care, many who are being denied care simply because they are sick, many others who are kicked off their insurance because they get sick. And I think a country that has been willing to bury its head in the sand and believe that people who don't have health care insurance don't get health care. Part of the reason that our system does cost as much as it does is because we get care to those 30 million people who don't have insurance. It just comes in the most inefficient, most expensive way possible when they show up in our emergency rooms. The federal health care legislation is not perfect, but it's an important step forward in addressing that fundamental liability of our economy and doing it on the basis of our private health care system by giving tax credits to individuals to be able to purchase private insurance. Now, the rate increase announced by the state's largest insurer has no justification in the text of the health care bill. And in fact, the Connecticut State Medical Society said exactly that in a very strong letter that was addressed to the state legislature and to the insurance commissioner. Other states have kept rate increases at numbers similar to previous years because of that evidence based on actuarial numbers that are presented to those insurance agencies. But moving forward, as a state, I think it's important to invest in a system of universal health care. Not just because I think it's the right thing to do for a compassionate nation, but because I think that it will address one of the fundamental liabilities to our economy. The legislation reduces the federal deficit over a 10-year window by $130 billion and potentially reduces the deficit by $2 trillion over the course of 20 years. The reason that occurs is because by shifting from crisis care to preventative care, you save money. And by shifting away from volume-based reimbursement to outcomes-based reimbursement, you save even more. And in the end, an investment in healthcare reform is an investment in the economic security of this nation.
2 minutes for Mr. Caligiuri.
I respectfully disagree that this bill was the right way to do it. In a civilized society like ours, every American should have access to affordable, quality care. But this legislation will ultimately do more harm than good, and that's why I will vote to repeal it if I get elected or defund it. We need to do it, but we need to do it differently, and we need to do it better. I think a bill which raises taxes by over $500 billion, cuts Medicare by over $500 billion, including $150 billion to the Medicare Advantage program, which 25% of all American seniors participate in, which every expert warned would see and result in increases in private insurance premiums of anywhere from 10 to 13%. We just saw in Connecticut a 47% increase, which the Connecticut insurance regulators say was justified in order to afford the mandates that are in this bill, is the wrong way because it's not going to save anyone any money. It's also potentially an enormous job killer for people in this region and throughout this country. The Congressional Budget Office just came out with a report saying that this legislation is going to lead to a reduction of 0.5% of the entire American workforce, which means losing 787,000 jobs. Insurance specific, we've got 40,000 insurance jobs in Connecticut, many of them tied to health insurance. Many of those companies are deeply afraid that this bill is going to result in fewer jobs, not more jobs. And that's going to hurt this economy overall in this region. There's a better way to do it. I would do it by making tax credits for small businesses to make it affordable for them to provide health insurance to their employees, the centerpiece of the proposal, not the expansion of Medicaid entitlement, which is already something that we're having a very difficult time affording.